12 Sun Belt cities where the housing bubble is bursting. Remember when everyone said you had to move to the Sun Belt or you'd be left behind? Remember when Austin was the future? Remember when real estate agents couldn't shut up about how Phoenix and Tampa were going to boom? Forever? Yeah, about that. Turns out bubbles pop, even in places with good weather and low taxes, especially where developers built 50,000 houses based on demand that lasted 18 months. The Sun Belt housing market isn't cooling. It's not correcting. It's collapsing. Prices are down double digits from peak in some cities. Inventory is exploding. Homes are sitting on the market for months. Sellers who bought at the top are panic-cutting prices, trying to get out before it gets worse. This is what happens with a speculative frenzy fueled by cheap money, pandemic migration, and the belief that real estate only goes up. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Today we're counting down 12 Sun Belt cities where the housing bubble is actively bursting. We'll talk about how bad it is, why it's happening, and what it means. This is either the buying opportunity of the decade or a falling knife you should avoid. Honestly, I'm not sure which. Let's get into it. Here's what happened and why the Sun Belt is melting down right now. From 2020 to 2022, the Sun Belt experienced the biggest migration boom. People fled expensive coastal cities for cheaper Sun Belt metros. Remote workers cashed out equity and bought houses in Texas, Florida, Arizona, Nevada. Prices went absolutely insane. Bidding wars, waived inspections, offers 50 grand over asking. It was a frenzy. Developers saw this and built everywhere. Subdivisions in the desert, subdivisions in swamps, subdivisions on the outskirts of cities that were already sprawling. They assumed the migration would continue forever. They assumed demand was permanent. It wasn't. Remote work policies tightened. People realized living in Phoenix in July is genuinely dangerous. The novelty of no state income tax wore off. When you factored in brutal summers, insurance costs, and the fact that there's nothing to do in most of these places. And most importantly, interest rates went from 3% to 7%, which murdered affordability. So demand collapsed, but supply kept coming. All those houses developers started in 2021 and 2022 are finishing now, in 2025. And there's nobody to buy them. Inventory is surging, prices are falling, and sellers who bought at the peak are underwater or close to it. This is a classic bubble pop. Speculation, overbuilding, a sudden demand shock, and a supply glut. It's happened before. It's happening again. And the Sun Belt is ground zero. The cities on this list aren't all doomed. Some will recover. Some were never that great to begin with. But right now, today, they're all experiencing significant price declines, rising inventory, and increasing desperation from sellers who realize they're stuck. Should you buy in these cities now? Maybe. If you're okay catching a falling knife. If you think prices have bottomed, which they probably haven't. If you're planning to stay long-term and you can afford the carrying costs. But if you bought at the peak, you're probably underwater. And that sucks. But you're not alone. Thousands of people made the same mistake. All right, let's go through the 12 cities where the bubble is bursting hardest. Number 12, Charlotte, North Carolina. Starting with a city that's not quite Sun Belt, but close enough and definitely experiencing a correction. Charlotte saw prices spike during the pandemic as finance and tech workers moved there from expensive cities. But prices have dropped about 8 to 10% from peak. Inventory is up significantly, and homes that used to sell in days are now sitting for weeks or months. Charlotte is still growing. It's still a real city with real jobs. But the speculative mania is over. If you bought in 2021 or 2022 expecting quick appreciation, you're disappointed. If you're buying now, you might actually get a deal. The problem with Charlotte is it's kind of boring and the sprawl is insane. You're spending half your life in traffic on I-77, but at least prices are coming back to reality. Charlotte discovered that finance brothers moving from New York doesn't create permanent housing demand. Number 11, Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh had the same pandemic boom as Charlotte. Tech workers, research triangle jobs, everyone calling it the next Austin. Prices are down about 7 to 9% from peak now. Raleigh is actually nice. Good universities, decent job market, not terrible weather. but developers overbuilt. Lots of new apartment complexes and subdivisions sitting half empty. And the people who were going to move there for remote work either already did or changed their minds. The correction in Raleigh is relatively mild compared to other cities on this list. But it's real, and if you're a seller, you're cutting prices and hoping someone bites. Raleigh is learning that being called the next Austin is actually a curse. Number 10. Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville got stupid expensive during the boom. Bachelor parties, country music, no state income tax, everyone thought it was the place to be. Prices are down about 10 to 12% from peak. The problem with Nashville is it became a victim of its own hype. The cost of living got too high for actual musicians. Traffic became unbearable, and the city that was supposed to be affordable suddenly wasn't. Now inventory is spiking. Homes are sitting. Sellers are cutting prices. And the people who bought at the peak thinking Nashville was a sure thing are realizing they overpaid. Nashville is still fun to visit. Living there, that's a different calculation now. Nashville partied to hard and now has a real estate hangover. Number 9. Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. DFW is massive and the market varies wildly by area. But overall, we're seeing prices down about 8 to 10% from peak with inventory surging. Texas in general overbuilt. Developers thought the California exodus would last forever. It didn't. And now you've got thousands of new homes competing for buyers who aren't there anymore. DFW still has jobs. It's still growing, but the speculative frenzy is over. If you bought a house in Frisco or Plano in 2021 expecting it to appreciate forever, you're learning a hard lesson. The upside is DFW is big enough and economically diverse enough that it'll probably stabilize and recover eventually. But right now it's in correction mode. DFW is too big to fail, but not too big to correct. Number 8. Sacramento, California. Sacramento boomed because people got priced out of the Bay Area. They cashed out and moved inland. Prices went crazy. Now they're down about 12 to 15% from peak. The problem with Sacramento is it's hot, really hot, and it's not the Bay Area. You move there for affordability, but you're not in San Francisco. You're in the Central Valley, and now that prices are correcting, the value proposition is less clear. Inventory is way up. Days on market have tripled. Sellers are cutting prices aggressively, and people who bought at the peak are wondering if they made a huge mistake. Sacramento might be the capital of California, but right now it's the capital of housing regret. Number 7. Boise, Idaho. Oh, Boise. The poster child of pandemic housing insanity. Prices went up over 50% in 2 years. Now they're down about 15 to 20% from peak, and still falling. Boise became a meme. Everyone moved there. Tech workers, Californians fleeing politics, remote workers who wanted mountains and freedom. Developers built everything everywhere, and then demand evaporated. Now Boise has a massive oversupply. Homes sit for months. Sellers are desperate, and the people who move there are realizing that Boise is actually kind of boring and isolated. And you're spending a fortune heating your house in winter. The correction in Boise is severe, and it's probably not done. This is what happens when a small city becomes the subject of a speculative frenzy. Boise went from hidden gem to housing disaster in about 3 years. Number 6. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix is the definition of unsustainable growth. The city is running out of water. Summer is literally deadly, and developers build suburbs on top of suburbs. Prices are down about 12 to 15% from peak. The pandemic brought a flood of people to Phoenix. Cheap housing, no state income tax, warm winters. But people are learning that living somewhere that hits 115 degrees for months is miserable. And the water situation is genuinely concerning. Inventory is exploding. New homes are sitting unsold. Sellers are cutting prices. And insurance costs are rising because of climate risk. Phoenix is experiencing a correction and possibly the beginning of a long-term decline. If you bought in Phoenix at the peak, you're probably wondering if you made a terrible life decision. And you might have. Phoenix bet on infinite growth in a desert. That was always going to end badly. Number 5. Tampa, Florida. Tampa is where the Florida housing bubble is most obvious. Prices are down about 15 to 18% from peak. Inventory is surging, and sellers are panicking. Tampa had everything going for it during the boom. Florida tax advantages, beaches, remote workers fleeing cold states. But now insurance is insane. Hurricane risk is real, and the speculative frenzy is over. Homes that sold in days in 2021 are sitting for months now. Price cuts are everywhere, and people who bought investment properties thinking they'd flip or Airbnb them are realizing they're stuck. Tampa is still a real city with real jobs, but the housing market is correcting hard. And if you bought at the peak, you're underwater or close to it. Tampa is learning that sunshine doesn't stop bubbles from popping. Number 4. Las Vegas, Nevada. Vegas is always a boom and bust city, but this bust is particularly nasty. Prices are down 15 to 20% from peak. Inventory is way up, and the market is frozen. Vegas boomed during the pandemic for the usual reasons: cheap, no state income tax, warm weather. But Vegas is a terrible place to actually live. The economy is tourism dependent. The heat is oppressive, and the city has no real culture outside of casinos. Now the bubble is popping hard. Sellers are cutting prices desperately. Homes sit for months. People are learning about market cycles the hard way. Vegas is also dealing with water problems and extreme heat long term. The city's viability is questionable. Short term, the housing market is a disaster. What happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. It crashes and you lose money. Number 3. Austin, Texas. Oh, Austin. The city that was supposed to be the next Silicon Valley. The city everyone moved to. The city where prices went absolutely parabolic. Prices are down 18 to 20% from peak now, and still falling. Austin's bubble was particularly insane because it combined tech hype, California exodus, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. Developers built thousands of apartments and houses, and then tech layoffs happened. Return to office policies happened, and people realized Austin traffic is hell and summer is miserable. Now Austin has one of the highest vacancy rates. Sellers are offering massive concessions. Price cuts are routine. People who bought at the peak are genuinely underwater. Austin is still a real city with actual jobs, but the bubble popped hard, and recovery is going to take years. Number 2. Cape Coral, Florida. Cape Coral is a weird place that became a pandemic darling and is now imploding. Prices are down 20 to 25% from peak. Cape Coral is canals and suburban sprawl. It boomed because it was cheaper than other Florida markets and people thought they were getting a deal. But the insurance situation in Florida is catastrophic. Hurricane risk is extreme, and the city is built on land that probably shouldn't have been built on. The correction here is severe. Homes sit unsold. Sellers are slashing prices. People who bought investment properties are abandoning them because the carrying costs are crushing. Cape Coral might be the poster child for building cities in places that shouldn't have cities. And now the market is correcting accordingly. Cape Coral is Florida's housing market on hard mode. Number 1. Scottsdale, Arizona. And at number 1, the biggest housing bubble pop on this list, we have Scottsdale. Scottsdale prices are down 20 to 25% from peak, maybe more depending on the neighborhood. This is one of the most severe corrections in any major metro in America. Scottsdale marketed itself as luxury desert living, but it's fake. It's expensive. It's 115 degrees in summer. The water situation is terrible, and the luxury lifestyle is basically chain restaurants and golf. During the pandemic, people with money moved to Scottsdale, thinking it was paradise. Now they're realizing it's an unsustainable suburb in the desert with climate problems and no real culture. The bubble is bursting hard. Inventory is exploding. Sellers are desperate. People who bought at the peak are looking at massive losses. Scottsdale represents everything wrong with Sunbelt speculation. Overpriced, unsustainable, built on hype, and now correcting to reality. Scottsdale is where luxury real estate goes to die in the desert heat. So what does all this actually mean? First, the Sunbelt boom was a bubble. Not everywhere, not permanently, but in many markets, prices detached from fundamentals. People bought based on hype, speculation. and the assumption that migration and appreciation would continue forever. They didn't. Second, this correction is real and it's not done. Prices are still falling in most of these markets. Inventory is still rising, and sellers are still cutting prices. We haven't hit bottom yet. Third, this creates opportunity. But catching a falling knife is dangerous. If you buy now thinking you're getting a deal, you might be right, or prices might drop another 10%. Nobody knows. Fourth, the people who bought at the peak are screwed. Not permanently. Markets recover eventually. But if you bought in Austin or Scottsdale or Boise in 2021 or 2022, you're probably underwater. And that's painful. And fifth, this is a lesson about market cycles. Real estate doesn't only go up. Bubbles pop, hype fades, and fundamentals matter. The Sun Belt had a moment. Now it's correcting. So there you have it. 12 Sun Belt cities where the housing bubble is actively bursting. Some of these markets will recover. Some might not. Some are always questionable places to build massive populations. Others are real cities that just experienced a speculative frenzy and are now correcting. If you're thinking about buying in one of these markets, do your research. Understand that prices might keep falling. Understand that you're betting on recovery. And understand that the Sun Belt story might have been oversold. If you bought at the peak, I'm sorry. That sucks. But you're not alone. Thousands of people made the same bet. Some will hold and wait for recovery. Some will sell at a loss and move on. It depends on your financial situation and your timeline. The irony is the Sun Belt was supposed to be the escape from expensive, dysfunctional coastal cities. And for a moment, it was. But bubbles don't care about your reasons for moving. They pop anyway. So here's my question for you. If you could go back to 2021, would you still buy in one of these markets? Or would you rent and wait? And if you're looking now, are these markets opportunities or traps? Drop a comment. Let me know. Because I genuinely think this is one of the most interesting housing stories happening right now. And nobody's talking about it enough. And if you found this useful, consider subscribing. We do housing markets, bubbles, and economic weirdness. Someone has to document the chaos. Might as well be me.